like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I get enough.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Deep Dive. This time, we're going to be talking about a story that's been making headlines. It's a story about wealth and reality TV, and a pretty dramatic fall from grace.
Oh, yeah, it's a big one.
We're going to be talking about the Karen Huger DUI case.
Right.
So if you're a fan of Real Housewives, or you just like kind of seeing how legal cases play out, this deep dive is going to be really interesting for you. I think you're going to learn some surprising things.
Yeah, I think so too. You know, it's interesting how this case has gotten so much attention.
Right.
Karen Huger, you know, she's known as the Grand Dame of the Real Housewives of Potomac, right? She's really worked to build up this image of elegance and wealth and poise.
Right.
So when the news came out that she'd been arrested for a DUI back in March, after she got into a car crash late at night in Potomac, Maryland, it was a big deal in the media, you know?
Yeah, it was a big contrast between her public image and like what happened that night. It was really striking. So, you know, because she's known for these lavish parties, high-end lifestyle, and then to picture her like swaying and refusing help and then being verbally abusive to the first responders.
Yeah.
I mean, it just doesn't compute.
Yeah, and it's those details that came out during the trial that make it such an interesting case, I think.
Right.
You know, witnesses described a scene that sounded just chaotic and really unsettling, honestly. You know, Huger driving a Maserati crashes into a pole and then allegedly just behaving in this way that's so different from how she presents herself. It's just wild.
I know. I bet the body cam footage was a big part of the evidence, huh?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The prosecution really relied on the body cam footage.
Right.
Which it showed Huger, they say she was slurring her speech, refusing to take a breathalyzer or a field sobriety test. And so that footage, when you combine that with what all the witnesses were saying, it really seemed like she was intoxicated.
Wow. And then on top of all of that, she allegedly asked the officers, "Do you know who I am?"
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I feel like that must have really stuck with the jury.
Oh, yeah, definitely didn't help her case at all. I mean, a lot of times people see that as someone trying to use their status or their influence, you know, to get out of the consequences. And when it's a DUI case, public safety is the main thing that matters, right? So that kind of attitude can really backfire.
So let's talk about the specific charges. She was found wealthy on 4 charges. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So DUI, negligent driving, failure to control speed to avoid a collision, and failing to tell the authorities about an address change.
Wow. Okay.
But it's interesting. At first, she was also charged with reckless driving, but they acquitted her of that one.
So why do you think the jury acquitted her on the reckless driving but found her guilty of negligent driving? Like, what's the difference, legally speaking?
Well, that's a good question.
Yeah.
It kind of gets into these little legal details. Reckless driving means that you're intentionally not caring about safety.
Right.
While negligent driving means that you just didn't take care like a reasonable person should.
Right.
So the jury might have thought that she was being careless and negligent, but that her actions weren't intentional enough to be reckless.
Oh, okay.
Maybe they thought she was impaired, right? Which is why she was found guilty on the other charges.
Right.
But not that she was trying to put other people in danger on purpose.
Gotcha. Okay. So she was found guilty on those 4 charges. What are the possible consequences for those?
Well, if you combine all the charges, the maximum sentence is 2 years in prison.
Wow.
But her sentencing is set for January 29th. So we'll find out then what the judge decides to do.
Yay.
But it's important to note that even if she doesn't get jail time, getting convicted of a DUI can really hurt your reputation. It can have consequences for a long time.
Definitely. So the prosecution had all the witness testimony and the body cam footage. What about the defense? What was their strategy?
Well, the defense tried to say that Huger wasn't acting that way because she was intoxicated, but because she was really upset.
Right.
They said she got a phone call right before the crash that made her distraught and agitated.
And that's why she was acting so erratically.
So they called her cousin to testify, right?
Yeah, exactly.
To kind of humanize her and make the jury feel bad for her.
Exactly. The cousin talked about what the phone call was about. And they were hoping to convince the jury that she was just really upset, not impaired.
Right.
You know, it's a pretty common tactic in DUI cases to try and shift the attention away from the evidence of being intoxicated.
Okay.
And give another explanation for how the defendant was acting.
Right. But in this case, it seems like the prosecution had really strong evidence.
It really does seem that way.
Yeah.
The jury went with the prosecution's story. which seems to mean that they thought the evidence of intoxication was more convincing than the defense's claims.
Right, right. This brings up an interesting question, though. Do you think that because it's Karen Huger, because she's on reality TV and she's got this carefully crafted image, do you think the jury held her to a higher standard? Like, would the same defense have worked for someone who wasn't in the public eye? That's a really good point. It's something that legal experts talk about a lot.
Right.
Does being a celebrity make it harder to convince a jury?
Yeah.
Do juries expect public figures to behave differently? It's definitely something to think about.
Yeah. So we had this clash between her public image and what supposedly happened that night. It's like a recipe for all this legal back and forth.
Yeah, I hope.
And didn't the defense try to get the whole case dismissed?
Oh, they did. Yeah, the defense filed a motion to dismiss, arguing that they got the evidence against Huger illegally. They said that searching her and taking the body cam footage, that violated her rights.
That seems like a long shot. Especially with all the witness testimony.
It usually is.
Yeah.
But, a lot of times in criminal defense, they try to challenge whether they got the evidence legally. Sometimes they can get some key evidence thrown out if it turns out they didn't get it the right way.
Right.
And that can weaken the prosecution's case.
Okay. But in this case, the judge said no. Right.
Right. The judge denied the motion.
Okay.
So the case went to trial, and in the end, the verdict was guilty.
Wow, man. This deep dive's getting more and more interesting. Yeah. You've got the actual incident itself, this clash between her public persona and what people are saying she did, and then all this legal maneuvering going on in the background. It's like a legal thriller playing out in real life.
Totally. And we've only scratched the surface. In the next part of our deep dive, we'll get into what this might mean for Huger's career and her public image. This DUI conviction could affect a lot more than just the courtroom.
This is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
I can't wait to hear your thoughts on how this might play out for her on Real Housewives and just in general.
Oh, yeah. It'll be interesting to see. Stick with us.
All right. So we're back. We've been looking at the details of the Karen Huger DUI case, the charges, what evidence they had, and what legal stuff both sides were doing.
Right.
But now let's talk about something else that's interesting. How this conviction could affect Huger's public image and her career, all that stuff she's worked so hard to build.
Yeah, it's a weird situation because of the reality TV thing.
Yeah.
Huger spent years making herself into this Grand Dame of Potomac, showing off her money and her perfect life.
Right, right. And alcohol's like a big part of the Real Housewives shows, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
It's almost like its own character.
Yeah.
So how does a DUI conviction fit into that?
It's just a totally different vibe. Right. You have this show that's all about fancy parties and getting together and drinking.
Right.
And then one of the stars gets convicted of driving under the influence.
Yeah.
Which is a serious thing, right?
Right.
It can really hurt people.
Yeah.
It makes people think about the show in a different way.
Yeah. So do you think people will see Huger differently now? Will they still believe in the Grand Dame thing after seeing this other side of her?
It's tough to say. I mean, people who watch these shows, they get it.
Yep.
They know that reality TV isn't really real.
Right.
And they're usually pretty forgiving when the people on the show mess up.
Yeah.
But a DUI conviction, that's serious.
Yeah.
Especially with her allegedly being rude to the police, too.
Right. It'll be interesting to see what Bravo does, the network that does Real Housewives.
Yeah.
Will they talk about it on the show? Will they distance themselves from her?
That's a good question. It makes you wonder, what are the producers and the network supposed to do?
Right.
Are they supposed to hold their stars accountable for what they do, even if it happened off camera?
Right.
Or is it just about being entertaining, even if that means ignoring serious stuff?
It's a tough one. And then there's Huger's sponsors, too.
Oh, yeah, right.
She has all these endorsement deals. Now those companies have to think about how this conviction makes them look.
Totally. It's not just about Huger's reputation anymore.
Right.
These days, people care about what companies stand for.
Yeah.
A DUI, especially with the alleged bad behavior, that's not the image most companies want.
Right. So I wouldn't be surprised if some companies stopped working with her to protect their own image.
Yeah, it could be like a domino effect.
Exactly.
Companies rethinking their partnerships, maybe even dropping her altogether. She could lose a lot of money.
It shows how celebrity, image, and money are all tied together.
Right.
For reality TV stars, their personal brand is their biggest asset.
Yeah.
If that gets messed up, it can cost them big time.
And it's not just about money, right?
Right.
Her social standing, her relationships with the other Real Housewives, all that could be affected.
Oh, yeah. Reality TV loves drama and conflict.
Right.
This whole thing could easily become a storyline on the show.
Right.
It could cause problems between Huger and the other cast members. I wouldn't be surprised if some of them publicly distanced themselves from her.
Right.
Or even confronted her about it on camera.
Yeah. And speaking of confrontation, her sentencing's coming up on January 29th.
That's when the judge decides her punishment. It could be anything from fines to community service to actual jail time. But aside from the legal stuff, there's the question of personal responsibility.
Yeah.
Do you think she'll admit she did wrong?
That's the big question.
Yeah. Will she say she's sorry? Will she understand that what she did was serious and could have hurt people?
Right.
Or will she try to make excuses for herself? Will she say that she was just too upset and that's why she acted that way?
It all comes down to how she decides to handle this from now on.
Right.
That'll really shape what people think of her and what she can do in the future. Will her fans stick by her? Will companies work with her again? Will her castmates forgive her? It's all up to her.
It seems like she's at a crossroads.
Yeah.
She can either admit her mistakes and learn from them, or she can deny everything and make her reputation even worse.
And how she reacts will probably influence how other people react too.
Right. So this case, even though it's really personal for Huger, it also makes us think about bigger societal issues, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It makes us think about how we view celebrity culture. We're drawn to these rich and famous people, but we also expect them to be held accountable when they break the law.
It's like we're fascinated by both the good and the bad sides of celebrity. We want to see behind the scenes of their perfect lives, but then we're also quick to judge them when things go wrong.
Yeah, it's an interesting contradiction.
It is. This case reminds us that even those people with all their money and fame still have to follow the same rules as everyone else.
Right.
And maybe the consequences are even bigger for them because everyone's watching.
Exactly. In Huger's case, she's under a microscope.
Yeah.
Everyone's talking about what she did.
Right.
Not just the legal system, but the media, the public, even her friends.
Right.
The pressure and the judgments are huge because she's famous.
And it also brings up this bigger societal issue of drinking and driving.
Oh, yeah.
Even with all the campaigns and stricter laws, it's still a problem.
It really is.
Huger's case, unfortunately, is just another example of how dangerous it is to drink and drive.
Yeah, it's a choice that can really hurt people. Not just the driver, but anyone else who gets caught up in it.
Right. It's a reminder that your actions matter no matter who you are.
Right.
And those consequences can spread and affect other people's lives too.
It makes you wonder what messages we're sending about drinking.
Yeah.
On one hand, we make it seem glamorous, especially when it comes to rich people and parties.
Right.
But then we condemn people who drink and do reckless things. It's confusing.
It is a mixed message. And Huger's case is a perfect example of how that can lead to problems.
And then there's the issue of taking responsibility.
Yeah.
No matter what happens at her sentencing, will Huger actually own up to what she did? Will she see this as a chance to grow?
We'll see. I guess her actions over the next few weeks and months will tell us a lot.
Yeah.
Will she show that she's sorry? Will she get help if she needs it? Will she use her fame to tell people about the dangers of drinking and driving?
Those are all big questions, and the answers will probably determine what people think of her and what she can do in the future.
Yeah. So as we wrap up this part of the deep dive, we're left with a lot more than just answers about a DUI case. It's making us think about our own values, how we judge people, and how we feel about fame, accountability, and all that.
This case is like a mirror. It shows us all the complicated and contradictory stuff about ourselves and the society we live in.
We've looked at the legal details, what could happen to her career, and what this all means for society. But in the end, the biggest takeaway might be that actions have consequences.
Right.
Doesn't matter who you are or what you have.
It's a reminder that real accountability isn't just about what the law says. It's about looking at yourself, owning your choices, and trying to be a better person.
Okay, so we've covered a lot in this deep dive about the Karen Huger DUI case.
Yeah.
We've looked at the legal stuff, what could happen to her career, and how it affects her public image. But now let's step back and think about the bigger picture. What does this whole story tell us about society? Our values, our relationship with fame and accountability. What do you think?
Well, I think this case really shows how we view wealth and privilege in our society. It's complicated. On the one hand, we're fascinated by stories about rich people and how they live.
Right.
We love those reality shows that show us all the fancy stuff, the parties, and alcohol is often a big part of that.
It's like we're peeking into the lives of the rich and famous.
Yeah.
Even if it's just on TV.
Exactly. But then at the same time, we kind of want to see those same people held accountable when they mess up.
Yeah, like they shouldn't get special treatment just because they're rich and famous.
Right. We want to see them face the consequences just like anyone else.
It's interesting, isn't it? We're drawn to wealth and fame, but we also kind of want to see those people fall from grace.
Yeah, it's a strange thing. And this case really plays into that. Karen Huger has built this whole persona of being above it all, the Grand Dame. But now with this DUI and the accusations of her being rude to the police, that image is kind of broken.
Yeah, it shows that even the people who seem to have it all are still subject to the same rules as everyone else. And maybe the consequences are even worse for them because everything they do is so public.
Exactly. Huger is under a lot of scrutiny right now. Everyone's judging her actions, the legal system, the media, the public, everyone. And it's all amplified because she's a celebrity.
Right, right. And this case brings up another important issue. Drinking and driving. It's still a big problem in our society.
Absolutely. Despite all the warnings and laws, people still do it. And Huger's case is another tragic example of how dangerous it can be.
It reminds us that our choices have consequences, and those consequences can affect other people too.
Yeah. And it makes you think about how we, as a society, view alcohol. Sometimes we glamorize it, especially when it's associated with wealth and celebration.
Right.
But then we condemn people when they drink too much and do reckless things. It's a bit of a mixed message.
Yeah, it is confusing. And Huger's case is a perfect example of how those mixed messages can lead to trouble.
It also makes you think about personal responsibility. Will Huger take responsibility for her actions? Will she admit she messed up and use this as a chance to grow?
That's the big question. And we'll see how she answers it in the weeks and months to come. Will she show remorse? Will she get help if she needs it? Will she use her platform to talk about the dangers of drinking and driving?
Those are all important questions. Her actions will speak louder than words, and they'll likely determine how the public sees her and what she's able to do in the future.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we're left with a lot to think about. It's not just about a celebrity DUI case. It's about our values, our judgments, and our complicated relationship with fame and accountability.
It's a reflection of ourselves and the society we live in. It makes us confront some uncomfortable truths.
We've looked at the legal side, the potential consequences, and what this all means for society as a whole. But the biggest takeaway is that actions have consequences. It doesn't matter who you are or what you have.
It's a reminder that real accountability is about looking inward, taking responsibility for your choices, and trying to be better.
We hope this deep dive has given you a lot to think about. What are your thoughts on this case? And what does it mean to you? We'd love to hear your perspective. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
Sound the alarm. I'm coming up. We'll have a ball. I'm sweet like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I get enough.